Hello again. In this workout, we are going to practice baking high poly information onto a low poly model. So let's get started. First, I'm going to create a polygon plane and let's scale it up a little bit. I'm going to turn the grid off by clicking on this icon here. I'm going to zoom in a bit and let's add some details to this. I'm going to start by selecting some edges, and you don't have to select the exact edges that I'm selecting. Just choose some as long as they connect from one edge of the polygon plane to another. They can turn like this. Then I'm going to go ahead and hit the bevel tool, adjust the fraction however I want, and then I'm going to select the new faces that I created and hit Control E. I'll click on thickness and drag this in, and then I will click on offset. So that's good. Let's go ahead and I'm going to select these and do the same thing. Thickness, pull them in and offset them like this. Let's take a few faces here, extrude them and extrude these out, offset them inward like this. So right now what we're doing is we are making a bunch of details that we will bake onto a plane. So as you can see up here, we have the polygon count, and I can see that there are 342 tries on this object that we're making. In order to see this, you can go to display, heads up display, and check this box that says poly count. Each row here, it'll say like, okay, here are the number of verts, number of edges, faces, tries, and UVs. Each column, the first column is all of the verts, edges, faces, tries, UVs, all of the components that exist within the entire scene. So if I had more than one model here, it would show, okay, here's everything in the scene. The second column is whatever object is selected, and if I was in a component mode, the third column would show the components that were selected, the poly count for those. All right, so I'm going to delete this. All right, let's add some more details. So whenever we're adding information or details that we are going to bake onto a low poly, and not include through the geometry of the low poly, we need to make sure that those changes have some sort of angle to them. When we bake the normals, we're going to project rays at the object through this mesh. So let's go ahead and grab a few more faces like this, and let's see, maybe these ones, and extrude those in just with thickness, and we're not going to change the offset at all. So notice how this angle is 90 degrees. It's straight down, and if we look at it from the top view, we cannot see that change at all. This is similar to what will happen if we bake it. We will not have any depth information in the normal map for that portion. So whenever you are creating information that is going to be baked, you need to make sure that there is some sort of angle, and it's not just straight up or straight down. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not actually going to do this because I want to use this as a demonstration, but if I did want this to bake, I would need to do something like this and change the angle so that it could be seen from the top. But I'm going to leave it straight down like that. And let's go ahead and create a cylinder. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees and scale it down and scale it up. And move this down in here. I'll hit Control D and move this over, Control D again. And this one, I'm going to scale it down even more. Control D to duplicate again. And again, do something like this. And let's take these and just push them down a bit like that. So then I'll take all of these objects and I'll combine it into one object. So I can go mesh, combine, and then edit, delete all by type history. I'll rename this object in my outliner as bake test underscore high, and underscore high is the naming convention for the high poly. Next, let's create a plane. Again, I'm going to go to the inputs and take the subdivisions down to 1. And now I have a single polygon plane. I'll go to edge mode, select this edge, and vertex snap it to this edge over here. And I'll vertex snap this one to this edge. And as a reminder, to vertex snap, you can select an edge. Then by hitting W, going to your move tool, you can click on the direction that you want to move the edge. Then once that direction is highlighted in yellow, I can hold V for vertex snap and middle mouse click and drag over a vertex, and it will move it over there. So that's how I'm doing this. So now I have this polygon plane. I'm going to rename this to bake test underscore low. So now I have a low poly and a high poly, two different models. And this model, the low poly, is only 2 triangles, it's 1 polygon, and the high poly is 483 polygons and 766 triangles. So we're going to try and capture all of this information and place it on this single plane as an example of the high poly to low poly workflow. So the first thing that you need to do once you have both of your high poly and low poly is they need to match as closely as possible. And what I mean by that is they should be stacked directly on top of each other, and the profiles of the two should match as much as you can. It will always be different because the high poly is going to have geometry that the low poly does not have. Second, after everything is lined up, you need to make sure that the low poly is UV mapped. And we are using a flat plane, and that comes, the UVs for a flat plane are already complete, so we don't have to worry about that if you've been following along. So I'm going to go to File, make sure my project is set, and I'm going to set it in my C Mendenhall underscore learning. And then I'll file, export selection. Let's export this as an FBX. And we're going to export it into the data folder. And we'll name this bake test underscore low, because this is the low poly that we're exporting. Then I'm going to select the high poly, hit G to reuse the last thing, which was export selection. And this one we'll name bake test underscore high. And I'll hit export selection. Next, let's open up Substance Painter. Inside of Substance Painter, I'm going to go File, New, change this to 2048. I'm going to go to the data folder and select the low poly. I named it bait instead of bake. I'll select this bait test underscore low, hit open, then OK. I'm going to hit F on both screens and then just rotate to make sure I can actually see the low poly object. Then under texture set settings, I'm going to go to bake mesh maps, turn off ID, change this to 2048. And where it says high definition meshes, I will click on this page and select bait test underscore high and hit open. For this first test, we're not going to worry about all of these settings. I will change anti-aliasing to subsampling 4x4. And then I'll hit bake Lambert 1 mesh maps. So you can see we're starting to get the information that we need. And this, again, this is just a single plane. What's happening right now is we're not capturing the full depth of the model, right? So we're only getting just the top and bottom of these changes. And what we need to do to capture the full depth is increase our ray distance. And to do that, let's go back to bake mesh maps. And this max frontal distance and max rear distance controls the depth that rays are being projected through the model. So let's turn this up to 0.05 on each. Oops. And then I'll try it again. So that's a lot closer, but we're still not capturing everything. So let's go ahead and turn it up even more. We want to be careful with this because if we go too far, we'll start baking. The mesh will deform and it'll bake through itself. So let's try 0.1. 0.1. Bake. And there we go. I'll hit OK. And now you can see that we've baked the information from the high poly onto the low poly. And if I move the light around, light is behaving as expected to mimic the depth and detail. If we were to look at this from a lateral view, right, the illusion starts to become obvious. Notice how we can't see any depth on this portion. We are getting the ambient occlusion bake. If I got rid of that ambient occlusion like this, you'll see that it completely disappears. And again, that's because the rays can't detect that angle. And if you've been following along, good job. You've just done your first high poly to low poly modeling.